The morning sun blazed over Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton in Southern California. Cars lined up at the security gate, filled with proud families coming to watch their sons and daughters graduate from basic training. Among them sat Maria Rodriguez, alone in her beat-up Honda Civic, waiting patiently as the line inched forward. At 52, Maria looked tired. Her brown hair, streaked with early gray, was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore a plain blue dress she'd bought at Walmart the day before, and her only jewelry was a worn wedding ring on a chain around her neck. Her husband Carlos had died 3 years ago, and she'd driven 14 hours from El Paso to be here for their son Miguel's graduation. When she reached the security checkpoint, the young Marine guard barely glanced at her ID. "Parking lot B for family members," he said in a bored tone. "Follow the signs, don't wander off the designated areas." Maria nodded quietly and drove through. She'd been on military bases before many times, but she said nothing. Today wasn't about her. It was Miguel's day. The parking lot was chaos. Families in their finest clothes climbed out of SUVs and minivans. Fathers wore suits. Mothers wore heels and designer handbags. Maria looked down at her simple dress and worn flats. She grabbed her small purse and an old military jacket from the back seat. The jacket was faded olive green with various patches sewn on it. She draped it over her arm. The ceremony area would be air-conditioned, and she got cold easily these days. Walking toward the parade grounds, Maria found herself surrounded by groups of chattering families. A blonde woman in expensive sunglasses bumped into her, looked her up and down, and muttered something about these people to her friend. Maria kept walking. At the entrance to the ceremony area, families were taking photos by a large Marine Corps emblem. A group of well-dressed parents commanded the space, posing endlessly while others waited. When Maria stepped forward for her turn, a man in a polo shirt held up his hand. "Excuse me, we're not done yet," he said curtly. "We've got extended family coming, you can wait." Maria stepped back without argument. She waited 10 more minutes while the group took dozens of photos. Other families pushed past her, assuming she was staff or maybe cleaning crew. Nobody asked if she wanted to go next. Finally, Maria got her moment at the emblem. She took a single selfie, thinking Miguel would want to see it later. As she lowered her phone, she heard snickering behind her. "Look at her trying to work that phone," a young woman whispered. "Probably her first smartphone." Maria's jaw tightened, but she walked away. She'd faced worse than petty insults, much worse. Inside the ceremony hall, the good seats were already taken. Families had saved entire rows with jackets and bags. Maria found a single seat in the back corner, partially blocked by a pillar. She sat down and placed her jacket on her lap, running her fingers over the familiar patches. A heavy-set woman in pearls turned around and looked at Maria with false concern. "Honey, are you sure you're in the right place? This is for Marine families only." "My son is graduating today," Maria said quietly. The woman raised an eyebrow. "Oh, how nice. First-generation military family? That must be so exciting for you people, such an opportunity to move up in the world." Maria's hands clenched slightly. Not exactly first generation. The woman had already turned away, laughing with her husband about something on her phone. As the ceremony began, Maria watched the color guard march in with perfect precision. Her eyes misted slightly. She knew that march. She knew the weight of those flags. She knew the price of the honor they represented. The graduating Marines filed in, and Maria searched for Miguel. There he was, third row, standing tall and proud. Her baby boy, now a man, now a Marine, just like she'd once been, just like his father had been. The commanding general began his speech about honor, courage, and commitment, about sacrifice and service, about the warrior spirit. Maria listened to every word, remembering when she'd heard similar speeches decades ago. But nobody here knew that. To them, she was just another poor Hispanic mother, out of place among the suburban families. During a break in the ceremony, Maria stood to stretch her legs. Her jacket shifted, and for a moment one particular patch caught the overhead light. It was small, worn, and easy to miss, a bronze star with a V device for valor. A few seats away, Captain James Harrison, the base's operations officer, was scanning the crowd while waiting for the ceremony to resume. His eyes passed over Maria, then stopped. He looked again, focusing on the jacket in her lap. His face went pale. Harrison knew military patches. He collected them, studied them, and that particular combination on that old jacket, he'd only seen it once before. in a military history book, about a classified operation in Afghanistan that had gone terribly wrong, then impossibly right, thanks to one person. But that person was supposed to be a ghost story, a legend, not a tired-looking mother sitting alone in the back row of a graduation ceremony. Captain Harrison couldn't concentrate on the rest of the ceremony. He kept glancing back at the woman with the jacket. The patches told a story that seemed impossible. The bronze star with valor was impressive enough, but it was the combination with the other patches that made his pulse quicken. The combat action badge, the Purple Heart. And most telling, a small, discreet patch that only a few hundred people in the world would recognize. The insignia of a classified unit that had operated in the darkest corners of Afghanistan in 2003. The ceremony continued. Parents cheered as their Marines received recognition for marksmanship, physical fitness, leadership. Maria clapped politely for each one, saving her loudest applause for Miguel when he received an honor graduate ribbon. The woman in pearls turned around and shushed her. "Please, some of us are trying to hear the announcements," she said with false sweetness. Maria fell silent, but Captain Harrison saw her shoulders straighten slightly. It was a subtle movement, but he recognized it. The body language of someone choosing not to engage, not from weakness, but from discipline. After the formal ceremony ended, families were invited to the parade grounds to meet their Marines. Maria waited for the crowd to thin before making her way outside. She didn't push or jostle. She moved with careful, deliberate steps that Harrison recognized as someone used to navigating dangerous terrain. On the parade grounds, Miguel stood with 3 other Marines from his squad. Their families surrounded them, fathers slapping backs, mothers crying and taking photos. Maria approached slowly, and Miguel's face lit up. "Mom," he broke away from the group and wrapped her in a huge hug. "You made it. I wasn't sure you'd be able to get off work." "I wouldn't miss this for anything, Mijo," Maria said, her voice thick with emotion. Miguel's squad mate Johnson looked at Maria with barely concealed surprise. "This is your mom, Rodriguez, but she's so—" He caught himself. "So what?" Miguel's voice carried a warning edge. "Nothing, man, just, you never mentioned, never mind." The Pearls woman appeared with her son, Private Kenneth Walsh. "Kenneth, darling, come meet the other families. Well, the appropriate ones anyway." She glanced dismissively at Maria. Kenneth looked embarrassed. "Mom, please." "I'm just saying, darling, you need to network with the right people. Career advancement starts now." She turned to another parent. "You know how it is. Some people join the military because they want to serve their country, others because they have no other options." Miguel stepped forward, his face flushing red. "Ma'am, with respect." Maria placed a gentle hand on her son's arm. "It's fine, Miguel, let it go." "But Mom, she can't talk about you like that. She doesn't know." "She doesn't need to know," Maria said firmly. "Today is about you, not me." Captain Harrison had moved closer, pretending to check his phone. He heard the exchange and watched Maria's reaction. The restraint, the quiet dignity, but also something else, the coiled readiness of a warrior choosing not to fight. The families began moving toward the dining facility for the celebration lunch. Maria and Miguel walked together, slightly apart from the others. Harrison followed at a distance, still trying to reconcile what he was seeing with what those patches suggested. In the dining facility, round tables had been set up with white tablecloths. Families naturally clustered together, the officer families at certain tables, the well-to-do civilian families at others. Maria and Miguel sat at a half-empty table in the corner with 2 other Hispanic families and a young black mother with her Marine daughter. The Pearls woman, Harrison had learned her name was Patricia Walsh, held court at the center table, loudly discussing her husband's connections in defense contracting and how Kenneth was destined for officer candidate school. "Of course, breeding matters," Patricia said, just loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Military leadership isn't for everyone. Some people are meant to lead, others to follow. It's just genetics, really." One of her friends nodded. "So true. I mean, look around. You can tell which of these boys will be generals and which will be. Well, cannon fodder is harsh, but you know what I mean." Maria set down her fork. Miguel saw her hands tremble slightly, not from fear or hurt, but from controlled anger. "Mom, please," Miguel whispered. "I know what you want to do, but not here, not now." Maria took a breath and picked up her fork again. "You're right, this is your day." Harrison made a decision. He walked over to Maria's table and cleared his throat. "Excuse me, ma'am, I'm Captain Harrison. Mind if I sit?" Maria looked up, surprised. "Of course not, Captain." Harrison sat down and looked directly at her jacket, which hung on the back of her chair. "That's quite a collection of patches, ma'am. May I ask where you served?" The table went quiet. Miguel glanced at his mother, unsure what she would say. Maria's voice was steady. "Here and there, Captain, a long time ago." "How long?" "I enlisted in 1990, left active duty in 2008. Patricia Walsh had noticed the captain sitting at Maria's table. She whispered loudly to her friend, "Why is he sitting with them? Probably has to make the rounds, poor thing, community relations and all that." Harrison ignored her. He pointed to one particular patch. "That unit insignia, I've only seen it in one place before, a classified after-action report from Operation Mountain Storm." Maria's eyes met his. "You have a good eye, Captain." "Were you there, at Firebase Viper?" The question hung in the air. Miguel looked between his mother and the captain, confused. He'd never heard of Firebase Viper. Maria was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Yes, I was there." Captain Harrison's face had gone completely pale. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. The sudden movement drew attention from nearby tables. "Ma'am, would you come with me for a moment?" His voice was formal now, official. "Please bring your jacket." Miguel started to stand. "Is everything okay? What's going on?" Maria touched her son's shoulder. "It's fine, Mijo. Sit, eat. I'll be right back." She picked up her jacket and followed Captain Harrison out of the dining facility. Behind them, Patricia Walsh laughed loudly. "See, I told you something was off about her, probably some security issue. These people always have documentation problems." Outside, Harrison led Maria to a quiet spot near a memorial garden. He turned to face her, his expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Master Sergeant Maria Rodriguez," he said slowly, "you're the ghost of Viper." Maria's expression didn't change. "Nobody's called me that in 15 years, Captain." "My God," Harrison ran a hand through his hair. "I studied your action at the War College, 12 hours. Alone, 43 confirmed kills. You held that fire base against 200 Taliban fighters until reinforcements arrived. They said it was impossible. They said nobody could have survived that." "Somebody had to," Maria said quietly. "There were wounded who couldn't be moved." "You took 3 bullets. The report said you kept fighting with a punctured lung." "The corpsman did a good job patching me up. I could still shoot." Harrison stared at her. "Do you understand what you did? You saved 37 Marines that day. 37 families didn't get folded flags because of you. And you're sitting in there letting that woman—" He trailed off, anger creeping into his voice. "Captain, that was a lifetime ago. I'm just Miguel's mother now." "Bull," Harrison's military bearing slipped for a moment. "Sorry, ma'am, but that's bull. You're a living legend. There are Marines who tell your story to motivate their troops, and they don't even know you're real. They think you're a myth." Maria shifted uncomfortably. "The report was classified for a reason, Captain. I'd appreciate if it stayed that way." "But why, you should be?" "What, famous? Getting free drinks at bars? Having people thank me for my service everywhere I go?" Maria shook her head. "That's not why I did it. And frankly, Captain, I've had enough killing for one lifetime. I just want to watch my son graduate. I want to see him become the Marine his father would have been proud of." Harrison was quiet for a moment. "His father was Carlos Rodriguez, wasn't he? First Sergeant Rodriguez. He was at Viper too." Maria's composure finally cracked slightly. Her eyes misted. "Yes, he was wounded in the first wave. I was protecting him along with the others." "The report didn't mention you were married." "We weren't supposed to be in the same unit. But in Afghanistan, rules got bent. Carlos was transferred to Viper 2 days before the attack. Just bad timing." She paused. "Or maybe good timing. I got to fight beside him one last time before his injuries forced him out." "And Miguel doesn't know." Maria shook her head. "Carlos and I agreed. We didn't want him joining to live up to some impossible standard. We wanted him to find his own path. Carlos told him some stories before he died, but never about Viper, never about what I did." Harrison understood now, the quiet dignity, the restraint. This wasn't weakness, it was the self-control of someone who had nothing left to prove. "Ma'am, with all due respect, those people in there treating you like that, it's wrong." Captain, I've been shot at by Taliban fighters, survived 3 IED blasts, and held dying Marines in my arms. Do you really think I care what Patricia Walsh thinks of my dress? Before Harrison could respond, a commotion erupted from the dining facility. They heard shouting, then Miguel's voice rising above the noise. Maria was already moving, Harrison close behind. Inside, they found chaos. Miguel was standing nose-to-nose with Private Walsh, both in fighting stance. Patricia Walsh was shrieking about assault and demanding military police. A crowd had formed a circle around them. "Say it again," Miguel was saying, his voice deadly quiet. "Say what you just said about my mother." Kenneth Walsh, red-faced and clearly embarrassed, mumbled, "I was just repeating what my mom said, that your mother was probably some barracks bunny who got knocked up and—" Miguel's fist was already moving when Maria's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Marine, stand down." The command voice was unmistakable. Every Marine in the room automatically straightened. Miguel's fist stopped inches from Kenneth's face. He stepped back, breathing hard. Maria walked through the crowd, which parted without thinking. She moved differently now, not like the tired mother who had arrived that morning, but like the warrior she had always been. She stopped in front of Miguel. "You do not fight over words, Marine. Words are nothing. Actions are everything. You dishonor your uniform by letting this boy's ignorance drive you to violence." "But Mom," he said. "I know what he said. Do you think I haven't heard worse? Do you think your father didn't hear worse?" She turned to Kenneth. "Private Walsh, you're going to be a Marine for at least 4 years. In that time, you might learn that respect is earned through action, not inherited through birth. Or you might not. Either way, it's not my son's job to teach you." Patricia Walsh pushed forward. "How dare you lecture my son? You don't know who I am. My husband is." "I don't care who your husband is," Maria said calmly. She turned to Captain Harrison. "Captain, I apologize for the disruption. May I take my son outside?" But Harrison wasn't looking at Maria. He was looking at the wall behind her, where a series of photographs showed Medal of Honor recipients from the base. His eyes had fixed on one particular photo, a young woman in dress blues, receiving a commendation from the Secretary of Defense. The photo was partially obscured, and the name plate was small, but Harrison knew that face now. "Actually," Harrison said loudly, "I think everyone should stay exactly where they are." Captain Harrison walked to the wall of photographs, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. He pointed to the partially hidden photo and turned to face the room. "Does anyone know who this is?" he asked. Patricia Walsh, eager to show her knowledge, spoke up. "That's some Medal of Honor recipient from years ago. My husband mentioned it once. Some propaganda piece about women in combat." Harrison's jaw tightened. Propaganda piece? This woman single-handedly held Firebase Viper against 200 enemy combatants for 12 hours. She sustained 3 gunshot wounds and kept fighting. She saved 37 Marines. He walked over to Maria and stood beside her. "This woman is Master Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, the ghost of Viper, and she's standing right here." The room went dead silent. Someone dropped a plate and it shattered on the floor. Patricia Walsh laughed nervously. "That's ridiculous. That woman is a hero. This is just—" She gestured dismissively at Maria. Harrison pulled out his phone and showed it to the room. On the screen was a military database entry with Maria's service photo and record. "Master Sergeant Maria Elena Rodriguez, Bronze Star with Valor, 2 Purple Hearts, Combat Action Badge, and nominated for the Medal of Honor, which she declined." "You declined the Medal of Honor?" someone gasped. Maria looked uncomfortable. "I didn't do anything special. I did my job." "Her job," Harrison said, his voice rising, "was supply sergeant. She wasn't supposed to be in combat at all. But when Firebase Viper was overrun, she picked up a rifle and held the perimeter alone while the wounded were evacuated to the center of the base." Miguel stared at his mother, his mouth open. "Mom, is this true?" Maria met her son's eyes. "Yes, Mijo." But you never said, Dad never said." "Your father was one of the wounded I was protecting," Maria said softly. "He took shrapnel in the first mortar attack. The corpsman said he wouldn't make it if we didn't hold until the medevac arrived, so I held." Kenneth Walsh had gone pale. You killed 43 enemy fighters." "I stopped counting after 20, Maria said quietly. "It wasn't about numbers, it was about time. Every minute I held was another minute for the medevac to get closer." Patricia Walsh sank into a chair, her face white. Her world of social hierarchies and assumed superiority had just collapsed. Captain Harrison wasn't done. The after-action report stated that Master Sergeant Rodriguez continued fighting even after being shot in the shoulder, leg, and lung. The corpsman found her unconscious at her fighting position, her rifle still aimed at the approach route, surrounded by spent magazines and enemy bodies. An older Marine, a gunnery sergeant who had been helping with the ceremony, suddenly stepped forward. "Holy hell, you're her. You're really her. I was at Camp Leatherneck when they brought you in. The doctors said you should have been dead 3 times over." Maria shrugged. "I've always been stubborn." "Stubborn?" The gunnery sergeant laughed, but there were tears in his eyes. "Ma'am, you're the reason I stayed in the Corps. When I wanted to quit, my sergeant major told me about you. Said if one Marine could do what you did, then the rest of us had no excuse not to give everything." Other Marines in the room began moving closer, their eyes wide with recognition and awe. These young men and women had grown up hearing the story of Firebase Viper, never knowing the hero was real, let alone a Hispanic woman who had been sitting alone at graduation. Miguel finally found his voice. "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want you to join for the wrong reasons," Maria said. "I didn't want you trying to be me. I wanted you to be you, your own Marine, your own man. But all these years, people treating you like, and you just took it. What was I supposed to do, Mijo? Wear my medals to the grocery store? Demand special treatment? That's not who I am." She looked around the room. "That's not who any of us are. We serve because it's right, not for recognition." Patricia Walsh suddenly stood up, her face flushed. "This is ridiculous. Even if this is true, it doesn't change anything. My husband—" "Your husband," Captain Harrison interrupted, "is Gerald Walsh, defense contractor. I know exactly who he is. He's made millions selling equipment to the military. Equipment that Master Sergeant Rodriguez here had to use to defend Firebase Viper. Substandard equipment, according to the classified parts of the report. Her rifle jammed twice during the fight. She had to use enemy weapons to continue defending the position." Patricia's face went from red to white. That's classified information. You can't." "I can and I will if you say one more word disrespecting this woman," Harrison said coldly. "Your husband's company was investigated after Viper. They found cut corners, substituted materials. Marines died because of equipment failures. The only reason your husband isn't in prison is because he had good lawyers and connections." Kenneth Walsh looked at his mother in horror. "Is that true?" Patricia couldn't answer. She grabbed her purse and fled the room, her heels clicking on the floor. Kenneth remained, standing alone, looking lost. Maria walked over to him. "Private Walsh." He straightened automatically. "Ma'am, your mother's sins aren't yours. Neither are her prejudices. You're a Marine now. You get to decide what kind of Marine you'll be, what kind of man you'll be." Kenneth's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, ma'am, for what I said, for all of it. Apologize to my son, not to me." Kenneth turned to Miguel and extended his hand. "I'm sorry, Rodriguez. I was wrong about everything." Miguel looked at his mother, who nodded slightly. He shook Kenneth's hand. The room began to buzz with conversation. Marines were pulling out phones, looking up Firebase Viper, showing each other articles and reports. Several came up to Maria, asking for photos, for handshakes, for her to sign their graduation programs. Maria looked uncomfortable with the attention. "Please, this is your day, not mine." "Ma'am," one young female Marine said, "you're the reason I believed I could do this. My recruiter told me about you. Not your name, but your story, that a woman held the line when it mattered, that we could be warriors too." Maria's eyes misted. "You were always warriors, you just needed to believe it." As the crowd pressed closer, Captain Harrison noticed Maria starting to look overwhelmed. He stepped in. "All right, Marines, give the Master Sergeant some space. You've got Liberty starting in 30 minutes. Don't you have somewhere to be?" The crowd reluctantly dispersed, though many continued to stare at Maria with awe. Miguel stayed close to his mother, his arm around her shoulders, as if protecting her from the attention she had never wanted. "Mom," he said quietly, "I'm proud of you. Not for what you did at Viper, but for who you are. For raising me alone after Dad got sick. For working 2 jobs to keep us afloat. For being here today even after driving all night." Maria leaned into her son. "You're going to be a good Marine, Mijo, better than I was. Different maybe, not better, never better." Captain Harrison approached one more time. Master Sergeant, I know you value your privacy, but would you consider speaking to the graduating class? Just a few words. Maria looked at Miguel, who nodded encouragingly. All right, she said, but no war stories, they've heard enough of those. An hour later, Maria stood at the podium in the base theater. 200 newly minted Marines sat before her, their faces eager and young. So young. Had she ever been that young? She spoke without notes, her voice carrying clearly through the space. Marines, you've heard about Firebase Viper today, but I want you to forget about it. Forget about me. Because the truth is, every Marine has their own Viper waiting for them. It might be a firefight in a distant country. It might be a natural disaster here at home. It might be the day you have to carry a wounded buddy to safety, or the night you talk a fellow Marine out of ending their life. Your Viper might be the courage to stand up to injustice, even when it costs you, or the strength to admit when you're wrong, or the discipline to wake up every day and choose to serve something greater than yourself. I held a firebase for 12 hours, but there are Marines who have held the line for entire careers, 30 years of service without recognition, without glory, without anyone ever knowing their names. They're the real heroes. So don't try to be me, don't try to be anyone but yourself. But when your moment comes, and it will come, remember that you're a Marine. Remember that word impossible is not in our vocabulary. Remember that we don't fight for glory or recognition. We fight for each other. And one more thing. She looked directly at Miguel. Tell your families you love them. Tell them often. Because every day you wear this uniform is a day they sacrifice too. They serve in their own way, waiting, worrying, praying for your safe return. She stepped back from the podium. The room erupted in applause. Every Marine was on their feet, cheering. Several were crying. As Maria walked off the stage, she passed Captain Harrison. He saluted her, a real salute, sharp and precise. She returned it, then continued walking. Outside, Miguel was waiting. Mom, that was. Enough, Mijo, it was enough. Now you have liberty. Go celebrate with your friends. I want to celebrate with you. Maria smiled. Then let's go find somewhere quiet, maybe get some real Mexican food. This base food is terrible. They walked together toward the parking lot, mother and son, Marine and Marine. Behind them, the sun was setting over Camp Pendleton, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. At the car, Miguel asked, Mom, do you regret it, not telling anyone, letting people treat you that way all these years? Maria considered the question. No, Mijo, because respect that's demanded isn't respect at all. It's fear or obligation. Real respect is earned through actions, through character, through the choices we make when no one's watching. She smiled. Besides, your father knew, you know now, that's all that matters to me. As they drove off base, Miguel's phone buzzed with messages from his fellow Marines. Word had spread through social media. The ghost of Viper was trending. News outlets were calling for interviews. Maria glanced at the phone and shook her head. Turn it off, Mijo. Today we're just family. Miguel powered down the phone and tossed it in the glove compartment. Mom, can I ask you something? Anything. Would you do it again, knowing what it cost you? The injuries, the PTSD, Dad's medical discharge because of his wounds. Maria was quiet for a long moment, watching the California coastline roll by. In a heartbeat, she finally said. Because 37 Marines went home to their families, 37 mothers didn't get a folded flag, that's worth any price. They drove in comfortable silence after that, 2 Marines heading into the sunset, carrying their shared legacy of service, sacrifice, and silent strength. 3 months later, Patricia Walsh's husband's company lost its military contracts after a new investigation was launched into Firebase Viper equipment failures. Kenneth Walsh wrote a letter to Maria, apologizing again and telling her that her story had inspired him to be a better Marine and a better man. And somewhere in El Paso, in a small apartment with a few photos on the wall, Maria Rodriguez continued her quiet life, working at the VA hospital, helping other veterans heal from their invisible wounds. She never gave an interview, never wrote a book, never sought fame from her service. But every Marine who graduated from Camp Pendleton heard her story, and they all knew the same truth. Sometimes heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes they wear simple blue dresses from Walmart and sit alone at graduation ceremonies, carrying their strength in silence, their courage in quiet dignity, and their love in the fierce protection of those who matter most. The ghost of Viper had finally been seen, and she was everything they never expected and everything a Marine should be.